Good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Dominance Academy. I'm your host, Mr. Justin. And let me just make sure all my settings are good. All right, there we go. Yep. Okay, yeah, I'm redoing my show from last night. It was going to be a part 2, but I've got more time. I can kind of lean into this one a little bit better. And it's all about understanding the female fantasy. And I'm reminded of this section of a lecture from Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about this, and he's talking about erotic literature for women. If you look at the tropes from a long time ago, there's a set of them that just is pervasive all throughout the years. And the archetypes are the werewolf, the vampire, the billionaire, the pirate, and the eccentric. I think it's the eccentric. I think that's the last one. Don't quote me on that. And those have been like the classic 5. Okay. Oh no, I'm sorry. The doctor or surgeon. That's the 5th one. And so the thing is that this has been like the running trope for all of these. Yes, the surgeon. Yep. And it's been the thing for a long time. And over the decades, I'm like right now, there's so much erotic literature out there, and it is straight porn for women. Like that's their version, right? And it's because literature is more immersive. It's more immersive than film, more immersive than video, because more immersive than audio, though audio can be a close second. And it's because it fully engages the mind. You have to use your minds to kind of visualize things, and you don't even have to do it. It's sort of like a passive response to reading, especially when it comes to fiction. So these tropes have been cast like all throughout the all throughout literature. And what's happened is that it's just kind of people have maintained the same ones, and then they've also just they've copied them, but they've also then morphed them, and there's been new ones that have popped up, new tropes and things like that. But the theme behind all of them remains the same, the basic theme. And so this is like the style, right? So if you look at, say, like werewolves, that's the style, right? Vampire is the style, pirate is the style, but the theme underneath, the current underneath, is relatively the same. And that current is the man has a presence. He has a certain presence and a certain amount of certainty about who he is. And he brings her into this. Now, the typical story is that the heroine, she's not this like docile little thing that just kind of like falls into him. Like that's not typically what happens in these stories. Usually there's like that. She's got a little bit of fire. She's got a little spunk. She's not totally like drawn into him right away. And then over time she does, right? She has her bit of resistance, and he quote unquote breaks her and takes her. And that really is the whole idea, where you have this male symbol, and he's immersed in himself, and not like in a selfish way, but just he's this like contained unit, and with his own sort of narrative going on before he even crosses paths with this girl. And there's a high level of conviction and certainty about his presence, even if it's just like this feral werewolf type character. And then he brings her in, or she tries to get into his world, right? And there's some resistance, and then he breaks her, and then she flows into his little universe. And that's really the crux behind female fantasy. That's now, of course, not all of them do this, but we're talking about commonalities. Okay, we're talking about the average. We're talking about what is most fantasized about in terms of not the details involved, but what's happening. Like the emotional theme that's happening. What's happening there emotionally. And for the most part, it's this idea of being taken and turned on while simultaneously being turned off. So turned on physically, turned on energetically, all right, but mentally turned off. Like her mind is turned off, her values are turned off, her morals are turned off, her views on this and that and the other is turned off. And she gets sunk into and absorbed into his experience. And this, I would say, is precisely what women are after when it comes to, ideally getting involved sexually from their psychological and their emotional standpoint. That's what's happening. And it's not like a conscious choice sort of thing. Okay. What's up, Uncle Guns? Thanks for posting my stuff. Oh, and thank you for changing the scheduling link. Yeah, I'm using Acuity now. I'm not using Calendly, because Calendly is not a partner with Instagram. So I can't have like a button on my profile, which reminds me I have to do that. I spent all this time switching all this shit around and to access Instagram with it, and I haven't done it yet. Too many irons in the fire. Yeah, so that's really it. And even if a guy knows this, he has his hesitations through his conditioning. And that's the sad part, because the conditioning, both the old and the new, and by the old, I mean the stuff that happened long ago, and the new, which is the stuff that he absorbs through his adult culture, right? Which is Gillette commercials saying like, hey, don't talk to that girl, or you don't want to be seen as creepy. You don't want to be accused of SA. You don't want to be socially castrated. All of this stuff that I've heard guys talk about. So that's like the new conditioning, which then just enhances the old conditioning, which has a lot to do with not believing in oneself, having a lower sense of self-worth, having a very high sense of self-doubt. And all of that stuff is the complete antithesis of what actually turns on a woman. And when I say turn on, I both mean physical arousal, right? Like her getting wet, but as well as like what lights her up psychologically and emotionally, okay, energetically. And so guys, have like a pretty large challenge in front of them if they want to get to a place that I would call freedom. And it starts with a freedom from themselves, freedom from what they think is right, and their fears, the things that they've absorbed to be afraid of. And I remember this one girl that I was spending some time with. There was a period in my life when I had a lot of exposure to witches, or like girls who thought they were witches, crystal rubbing, patchouli oil wearing, and I can't stand the smell of patchouli. Like by itself, it's obnoxious. Incense huffing type witches, new age. And there's one girl that I was with. She was very interesting, to say the least, in the bedroom. There was one point when she started speaking tongues, and it freaked me out quite a bit. But anyways, she and I were talking, and she was talking about fear, and she told me that fear is an acronym that stands for false evidences appearing real. And I thought that was brilliant. I don't know if she came up with it or she just was, reiterating something she heard, but that's profound. And because a lot of the fears that guys carry around with them, they are false evidences. But to them, they appear real. And so say like the fear of being called a creep. I've never been called a creep. I don't know anyone who, like, no guy has ever talked to me and said, "Oh yeah, I was talking to this girl, on the street or on the subway, and she called me a creep." I've never heard that in my almost 10 years of doing this, talking with guys who are at that stage of just getting used to talking to girls and that whole thing. I've never heard that story, not once. And I've spoken to hundreds of guys at this point. So it's this thing that's picked up like through media. So if you say these things or you believe these things, ask yourself, do I have evidence of this? Not some reel that you saw on Instagram, right? Do you have evidence of your own life, or do you know somebody who has had this experience that could tell you this, that could verify it, that it actually does happen? And I don't think it does. I don't think if it does, it's a very small subset of women who have the gall to be like, ew, like, get out of here, you're being creepy, right? And it would probably be in a very particular circumstance, like maybe at a club with her friends, and there's that very like confident, assertive vibe, because under normal circumstances, she's just going to smile, and you politely excuse herself, like, oh, I gotta go, and like that's it, and that'll be the end of it. So, be careful of the narratives that you keep in your head. And, if you hear them, say, is this real? Is this a justified true belief? And if it's not, you then have to ask yourself, well, why am I holding on to it? What's up, Mr. A? And that's always a very, very important thing to do, is to ask yourself, why am I holding this belief? Do I have evidence of its truth? And if you don't, then you got to figure out, well, why are you holding on to it? Is it to keep you small? Is it because it kind of hurts so good? Does it make you feel safe? Does it, inspire certain emotions that, make you feel a certain way that you're used to feeling? It's really important to examine your beliefs. Very important. So I wrote this essay here about this sort of topic. It's general, and then we'll get into some specifics about fantasies and, perhaps how you could utilize the power of fantasy to everyone's advantage, okay? To have positive, sexy, fun outcomes, okay? So most men think women are hard to understand. They speak of her moods like the weather, being unpredictable and potentially dangerous. They blame her for the collapse of polarity, for the drying up of sex, for the listless, disinterested eyes that once beamed with longing. And yet, when a man dares to look beneath her behavior, he sees something ancient and raw, something that isn't logical at all, but it's true. Because the truth is this: women don't want equality in the bedroom. They want truth. They want to experience power. Not the kind that harms, but the kind that holds and energizes. They want a man to break the trance of her nice girl exterior and reach into the animal beneath. They want to surrender, but not to a man who needs her to surrender. Only to one who does not need her at all. Only to one who is already full. Her deepest sexual fantasy is not about being safe. It's about being seen. It's about being known more deeply than her words could express. And this is where most men fail her. Not because they are cruel, but because they're blind. They think dominance is about imposing something on her. They think it's about aggression, about hardness, about towering over her. but it's not. Dominance is the stillness that doesn't flinch when met by her fire. It's the gravity that stays when she tries to push. It's not performance. It's not bravado. It's presence. And that, more than any line or any move, is what opens her. Women truly are erotic creatures, but the path to their surrender is not direct. It's layered. She will test. She will tease. She will pretend she doesn't want it just to see if you'll back down. She'll create drama or doubt and drama just to see what you are made of. Because in her core, she's not looking for equality. She's looking for something to submit to, something that won't be moved by her chaos. And when you understand this, when you stop trying to seduce her with approval and instead begin to see her clearly, something shifts. You stop needing her to validate you. You stop reacting, and suddenly she starts to melt. Not because you said the right thing, but because you stopped chasing her approval and started claiming her truth. What most men don't realize is that sexual submission is not born out of dominance. It's born out of trust. And trust is not built by agreeing with her. Trust is built by containing her. A woman trusts a man who has structure, who has rules, who has direction and discipline. And when she feels this, not in words, but how you move, her body relaxes, her mind quiets, her eyes soften, and that's when she begins to fall. She'll say things like, "I don't usually do this." She'll text you in the middle of the day with heat between her legs. She'll begin to submit in small ways, checking in, waiting for your lead, asking what you want, how she can serve you that day. But none of this happens by accident. It happens because you're no longer giving her options, you are giving her truth. And truth is what her body craves, not your opinions, not your sensitivity, not your clever, woke understanding of feminism. She wants a man who is unbothered, who doesn't seek to be liked, who doesn't defer or dilute himself, a man who speaks to her despite her fear. So how do you get there? It begins with watching. Listen to her breath. Watch how she fidgets. When she pauses before answering, when her laugh lingers, when she plays with her hair while biting her lip, that's not nothing. That's not cute. It's consent in code. That's her body asking you to lead. But most men ignore these signals because they're afraid of being wrong, of misstepping, of being labeled controlling or creepy. So they become passive, gentle, nice, and she dries up. She goes quiet. She starts saying, "I don't know," when you ask her what she wants. Not because she's indecisive, but because you stopped leading. You want her to surrender? Then give her something to surrender to. Not a soft boy and not a coach, not a co-equal partner who says whatever you're comfortable with. That's not what her erotic body is waiting for. She's waiting for the man who looks her in the eye and says, "On your knees." The man who knows that dominance is not about control, knows that it's not about control, it's about direction. The man who holds her throat not to choke her, but to remind her this is where she can let go. This is where she stops performing. This is where she gets to fall apart. Do you understand the gravity of that? Because her surrender is not weakness. It's sacred. It's violent. It's terrifying. She is giving you the thing the world demanded she always is to protect. She is offering the soft underbelly of her power and asking you not to flinch. And when you meet it with strength, not violence, not force, but strength, you give her the thing that no one else could, which is relief. That's why her deepest fantasies involve being taken, bound, held, stripped, used. Not because she wants to be degraded, but because she wants to be freed from the burden of always having to be in control. She wants to lose herself. Not forever, just long enough to remember that she is not the point, that she can serve, she can kneel, but you must earn that. Not by begging, not by manipulating, not by love bombing her with gifts or affection. You inspire rather than earn by standing in your structure. You inspire it by letting her shit test you without shrinking, by being slow to speak and slow to act, by noticing when she's in her head and pulling her into her body without asking for permission. You say, breathe. You say, present yourself. You say, no more talking. face down. And if her eyes widen, if she moans under her breath, if her body flushes, then you know. She didn't want your kindness, she wanted your command. The feminine longs to be taken, but only by the man who doesn't need to take her. The man who waits, watches, knows. The man whose stillness is not silence, it's strategy. Because the man who knows how to read her will never need to raise his voice. The man who sees the subtle invitation, her hips shifting forward, her neck tilting, her silence after a joke, will know exactly when to escalate and how. He'll do it without fanfare, without asking. He'll reach out and take her chin, hold it, look into her eyes and wait. And in that wait, she will fall apart. Because women do not want to be led with noise. They want to be claimed with presence. And presence is a language you cannot fake. You become it by refining your instincts, by paying attention, by moving slowly until the right moment calls for speed, by practicing restraint until she aches for you to act. Only then, when the tension is built into a scream beneath her skin, only then do you strike. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. This is the art of escalation. It's not random, it's not aggressive, it's not trial and error. It's the slow, deliberate dance of watching her cues and guiding her into depth. But that requires nerve. You'll never access a woman's true submission if you're afraid of her emotions. If her tears scare you, if her fire makes you flinch, you must learn to hold all of it, because her chaos is not the enemy, it's the doorway. It's the furnace in which her surrender is forged. And when you become the man who can walk through that fire without blinking, she will kneel, she will obey, and she will beg. Not because you forced her, but because you inspired her. True dominance requires nothing from her. It does not ask, "Are you ready?" It says, "You were made for this." And so I say to you, stop chasing her words. Learn to read her body. Learn to hold her gaze longer than her discomfort. Learn to say yes and command more. Because a woman's deepest fantasy is not about pleasure. It's about experiencing power. And the one who gives her the safety to relinquish her own. Let the others perform and let the others please. Your job is to claim. So that's my little essay on that topic there. And so what I described in that, all right, all of those, all the colorful words, that's to kind of, all of that stuff is encapsulated in those characters that are in those books. That's exactly what the vampire does. That's what the pirate does. That's what the surgeon does. The billionaire, the werewolf. They all do these, okay? And this is what she wants to feel, okay? And so once you understand the feeling that's desired, it's at that point that you can then take that feeling and then creatively sculpt it into basically any shape that you want. And this can be conveyed to her in text form, in audio form, or by way of creating a scene and enacting the fantasy. And this is the thing that really, really grabs women. It snatches them by the soul, by way of their mind. What's up, A? Would it make sense to leave my sweater with a bottle of fragrance in my pocket for slow burn at work for when I'm on PTO? What? To leave my sweater with a bottle of fragrance in the pocket for my slow burn at work. That implies that you're trying to attract women at your work. And that is a stupid idea. Unless you don't like your job. Yeah, don't fuck with girls at work. That's low-hanging fruit. Almost everyone at some point in jobs, they're like, ooh, that girl, she's kind of cute, but it's like, it's in a bubble. The girls at work, they happen to be there. And guys are just typically drawn to the cutest girl in the room. Whereas if you took that girl out of that context and put her in a totally different context, like put her in a bar, a nightclub, a library, what have you, like around like other girls or what have you, you would not see her in the same way. It's because you're in this bubble, in this very like closed off context, and you see them all the time, every day. And you're just going to be looking at her tits and go, oh yeah, tits. Hey, she's kind of cute. Like after a while, it's a bad move. It's low hanging fruit because it just happens to be there. Ignore them. It's just an NPC with tits. Okay. Like don't worry about it. Focus on your job. School's a different thing because it's just, it's crazy. But yeah, don't mess with your employment. And it's not like they're going to go, ooh, wow, that sweater smells so great. And they like start dripping. No, that's not the way it works. Okay. You make a girl wet and aroused and by making her think, right? But in think in a certain way, right? It's not logical or rational thinking. And this is the power of storytelling. I've got stuff on my website about the power of storytelling, and you have to get good at it. You have to feel the pacing of it. In what I just read, you got the sense that a lot of it had to do with being slow, being deliberate. There's no scattered energy. There's no rushing. And you're not driven by anything. And there's so much to that. Okay. Like look at the images around my face, right? You've got the girl there. She's likely bound in some way. She's got a collar around her neck. She has a blindfold on, and he's dangling an orange slice in front of her mouth. Okay. Now I know this was taken, made for the photo, but what's happening here? This is tension, right? He's keeping her on the edge of her seat. She's waiting on bated breath of what's going to happen next. And who knows the kind of, shit talking that he's putting in her ear, which is then amplifying the scenario. And this is really what is important. Okay. It's your communication. It's a huge aspect of how to weave a scenario. It's really important that you communicate and don't rely just on just what you're doing or anything like that. Don't rely on the music or whatever. You yourself are the greatest generator of arousal. And your confidence and like the calmness. The other thing about moving a bit slower is that it gives you time to think. It really does. Like if you don't have everything perfectly planned out or whatever, it gives you a chance to slow down and think. And you might be thinking like, oh, I don't want her to get bored or whatever. You don't have to worry about that. You do not have to worry about her getting bored. Okay. Like, especially if you're like at this stage, like where she's like tied up or whatever, and you're teasing her with an orange slice. Okay. And like just maybe making some sort of challenge about it, whatever it is. And then saying like, oh, well, if you do well with this, then, maybe I'll let you taste daddy's cock, which symbolizes to her that you're not in a rush to put anything inside her. And you'd be totally fine if she missed out on her opportunity. If she lost the challenge. You look in the top right. What is she? She's bound. She's been taken, and she's in a position that looks, somewhat compromising. It doesn't look very comfortable, but she's going to hold that. She's absolutely going to hold that position. And depending on how he's communicating with her, whether it's praise or degradation or some sort of mixture of the two, which is really where things get great. maybe his behavior is very, very sweet with her, is petting her face, brushing her hair, telling her how beautiful she is, but also the words themselves, they can be extremely degrading, that in some other context would be seen as kind of harmful. Excuse me. Or flip the other way. If it's flipped the other way, and maybe in that scenario, the physicality is rough. The physicality is degrading, but the words, they're sweet, they're romantic, they're encouraging. The encouraging words, that is using that. This is like straight throwing gasoline on the fire. Where if you're doing things that are aggressive, that are expressing your power, that could be moving towards or fully in degradation, but your words are encouraging, and you're bringing, like, the actions are uplifting. So you have this bifurcated mixture of like the oil and water, and this is powerful. This is really powerful. Like, just telling you, like, she's doing such a good job, and you've got plugs in her, you've got weighted clamps on her nipples, you may be using like the human grade cattle prods or whatever, but you keep praising her that she's doing such a good job, that daddy's very proud of her. These are all very, very powerful things. Okay. Again, my bottom left, bound with shibari. She's been taking the time, right? This wasn't a rush job. You cannot rush shibari. Okay. And that there, you see that metal ring with that piece of the metal rod going down, that's attached to a hook, all right? A J-shaped anal hook. And so it could be where the rest of her body is in such a way that, let's say, the ropes on her back are pulled, so she's like leaning way back, which is going to strain the muscles on the lower back. Like, you can't keep those muscles contracted all the time, okay? And maybe one of those is around her neck. So it's like pulling her neck and that sort of thing. And so she's going to want to like go forward. That's going to be the instinct to like let those muscles relax. But in doing so, it's going to cause tension to pull on that rope, and that hook is going to get pulled further up inside. And this is really, again, compromising. She's lost all power. She has no control in the situation and must accept immersing herself into that situation. Of course, we just have to assume that this is all consensual. But the thing is that, like, that's an example of the power. Like, this is an example of the feeling that is derived from those stories. It's the same feeling. So it's not really about, oh, I have to do this thing, like the specific act. It's not about that. It's about, like, all of these acts. You look at the bottom right? She's on the ground. Looks like she's naked. Maybe her feet are bound together so she can't walk. So now her movement is compromised. Perhaps her head is underneath a desk, which is like kind of, somewhat degrading. And the only thing available is her butt. And it looks like she's getting swatted with a cane. Actually, no, that's not a cane. That's a riding crop. So, it's like a cane, but has like a little leather loop on the end. Horseback riders use them. And it's one of my favorites. I love that toy. And so this is, that puts her in a position, right? She's compromised and emotionally compromised. And so all of these, they all have a particular feeling, and they're the same, basically. They're all the same. So it's not really about like what's done. You can essentially do anything. You don't have to be a shibari master. You don't have to get leather buckles and things like that. But if you are looking for sets, go on Etsy. They're a bit pricey, but go for the leather. Don't cheap out and get fucking vinyl. It's stupid. Like, the edges are sharp. They're thin. They feel cheap. The hardware feels cheap. just don't do it. Get yourself like good actual leather cuffs. Okay. And some of them, they're like custom made in the sense that you can choose different color combinations. So I've got a set that's like a mixture of like black and purple. And so like then you can run themes, so like all of your stuff can be like black and purple or, whatever you want to do. But if you're getting stuff like cuffs, leather restraints, just get leather. Don't cut corners and get vinyl. But in that, she's everything is about being compromised, of her letting go her autonomy, letting go of her will, and just saying, I'm here to be taken. I'm here to be used. I'm here to be swept into whatever the hell it is that you got going on. One second, I need to get my power cord. There we go. Yes. What's up, Luke Bay? Hey, kitten. Yes, my little kitten likes to get swept away, swept into her daddy's world too, doesn't she? So that's really what it's about. And so in order to do this, you have to do two things, right? In order to like really grow this, you got to do two things. One is you got to let go of your fear, let go of your concern, which is basically rooted in fear of rejection. That's really what it is. Like all this stuff about accusation of this or that, or her getting mad, like none of that is real. Like what's underneath that truly is that that you're just afraid of being rejected. You're afraid of being not good enough because you're looking to her as your measuring stick of value. You're seeing like, if she sees worth in me, if she sees value in me, if she looks up to me, if she finds me exciting and desirable and so on, then I matter. And this is, and this is entirely destructive thinking. And it's not entirely your own fault. This has to do with your conditioning. Okay. But you're grown. You no longer can blame anybody for your behaviors. Okay. Just know that something happened or some things happened that coalesced in you, having this sort of frame of mind. Okay. And it's okay. It sucks, but you just accept it as it is and say, okay, this is not conducive to what I want. It's working against me. It's actually working against both of us because she doesn't want me to be the way that I am. And I don't want me to be the way that I am. It's kind of weird though, because like the guy's afraid of stepping into his dominant masculine presence. He's afraid of it. Now, the other prong is he doesn't know how. Okay, and that's a whole other avenue. But he's afraid to do it, for fear of what I just mentioned. And she doesn't like you when you're nice either. But then that's the funny thing, is that guys know this. Like this theme has been on the internet long enough to know that like girls don't like nice guys. Like they like them, but they don't get aroused by them. They don't get moved by them. They don't need to change their panties because of them. Okay? And they certainly don't want their panties stuffed in their mouth by them. That's just going to be weird. It requires a certain person to be comfortable in a space, in a mindset, to yank her panties off and stuff them in her mouth because she's squealing too much because you're playing with her holes too hard, right? Or you're whacking her ass too firmly, right? And you might be thinking, wow, that's crazy, right? It sounds like it's a no, but she's actually really enjoying this, with the foundational like pre-understanding that this is consensual, okay? Which means she's willing to trust you. Right, that's what consent is. It's imbued with trust. So that out of the way, it's like the person that does these certain things, right? The one that ties her up and makes her beg for just a drop of orange juice from a slice, right? The guy that stuffs her head underneath the desk and just puts welts on her ass, okay? And then makes her say, thank you, master, after each and every strike, okay? That requires a certain someone who is he's completely or already completely embodied the type of person who would do those things naturally. So what I'm saying is, like, it's not an act. None of this is an act, okay? Like when I'm, I guess, in a position or a scenario to more creatively express my dominance and play with power differentials in the bedroom, I'm not putting on an act. Like, I'm not like trying something out, and inside I'm feeling, like, geez, I really hope this works out well. I hope I don't do something to piss her off or make her cry, right? That thought isn't even within the scope of my brain. It's not even close. And it's not a resistance either. It's not like all this thought comes in and I'm like, no, stay out, right? It's not even there to even resist. And that's really where you want to be. You want to be so comfortable with your own desires that what you do just comes out of you. And if it just so happens it doesn't go in the direction that you're hoping it would, you also have to trust yourself that you can guide it back on track, in the direction that is appropriate for the both of you. Okay. Because just because you are willing to be free doesn't mean that she's willing to accept 100% of the things that you're into. Okay. So there's two ways you can go about this. All right. One way is to what people typically do when, say, dealing with like play partners. Okay. People who meet at a munch, people who meet at a, like a sex party or like a kink club or something like that. They'll discuss things first and say, like, oh, what are you into? What am I into? Like, and they'll understand limits. They'll understand, they'll have just agreements, and they'll see where they cross over and where things are harmonious and where they're not. Okay. And then you can kind of like negotiate certain things and see about, how you can kind of make things happen. Now that's one way. And you might think that, gee, that's so very clinical and dry. There's no passion there. And for people who are experiencing that, like, it doesn't really change anything. Okay. Because once the door closes, right, that's a signal. It's like, okay, we agreed on all this stuff. You're on the level, I'm on the level. Now we can really get into this. We can just totally sink into how we want to be. Okay. And, and that's great. Right. So that's one way. The other way is to do as you do. And if you just so happen to get close to a line or cross a line, she'll say, hey, I don't like that. Or let's hope that she can. If not, then you have to read her, like read her face, read her eyes, read her breathing, read her, just all of the feedback that's coming from her body. And one way or the other, it'll tell you, no, this is not good. She'll freeze up. Okay. You can feel the tension in her body. That doesn't mean keep going. Okay. That means something's off. She's not open. She's not relaxed. Right. So this is something to read. And then at that point, you can verbally inquire, or you can just redirect and feel your way through that. Okay. Both are perfectly fine. The only time that I would say that you do not do this, that you do not kind of like feel your way through things, is with anything having to do with the higher extremes of stuff, where you're getting into like closer to the world of CNC, which is consensual non-consent. You don't want to do this. You don't want to, because that's just too intense. There's too much room for error if you don't discuss things up front. So I would not suggest that. Okay. But you're just getting into like some kinky fun, I would just say exercise the ability to trust yourself. And that will take you quite far. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. And if you would take a chance, you can open up a tab right now if you're on your laptop, or after the stream, or you can open up your browser and go to thedominance.academy.com and go over to the button in the top right corner of the main screen where it says book my free consultation, and just click that and it'll take you to the booking page, and we can discuss any sort of problems you may be having with relationships, dating, sex, marriage, polarity, or anything of that nature. Okay. So, really understanding the the female fantasy is quite simple. Like, it's not some big mysterious thing. They're not, women aren't, it's funny, like the more you progress within yourself, the more you realize that women are not as confusing as you once thought they were. There is a lot of variability and things like that in their behavior, but the essence of what's going on with a woman, it's not confusing. It really, really isn't. They're not as mysterious as Freud wanted to point out. That was like one of his famous quotes. I can't remember what it was, but it ended up with like, "What do women want?" It's like, what happens when you stop asking that question, you actually figure them out better. There's some irony in that. When you stop wondering what do women want and trying to figure that out, you actually end up figuring it out. That becomes the result. The answers just come to you, like, because you become the answer. That's what happens. Because if you're not focusing on them and trying to understand and then meet whatever it is that they, say that they're, wanting or needing, and you just put that attention on yourself, understanding what your wants are, understanding what your needs are, your visions, your fantasies, and working through those things so that they can run clean inside you. Okay. And by that, I mean without doubt, without shame, without guilt, without criticism, without judgment. That's what I mean by clean. There's no inner voice when you say, "Oh, I would really like to try that." And there's no voice behind it after that thought, except like, "Oh, that would be fun." And that's it. There's no other voice jumping in and go, but that's kind of fucked up. Or there's a sensation in your body of rejection. There's none of that. And that's what happens when you stop, because the judgment and stuff like that, that's all linked to other people's perception. What if somebody found out about this? What if somebody heard that I was into XYZ? I'd be criticized. I'd be judged, right? So that means you're concerned about what people think and feel about you, about aspects of you. So the more you just learn to accept that, because that's not real. Like, people really aren't going to do that. It's just again, the fear, right? False evidence appearing real. So it only appears real to you, but it's just a belief. It's not actually going to happen, but you do it to yourself, right? Out of projecting that others are going to do that. So once you kind of get through that battle and untangle that mess, that's when you become more settled. You become more bonded to your own wants, needs, fantasies, desires, kinks, and so on. And this makes it more solid. It makes it more grounded. It becomes more dense. And the denser it is, the gravitational pull begins, right? Just like, like the formation of stars. I think like the formation of a star, it's incredibly dense. And that's when it starts creating gravitational energy. And then as it expands, I don't know what happens to the gravitational energy, but that's what's going on, like with our own star. Okay. Tons of gravitational energy. And so we want to become like that dense star by really honing in, harnessing, and not really and really just letting go. Like I said before, many times, the one of the greatest skills that you could ever learn as a man when it comes to the development of self is letting go and just allowing what's there to be there, for a little while, in case there's something that actually does need to be removed or changed or what have you, adjusted, realigned, then you can. And it's so much easier to do that when you're not judging it, when you're not attached to it, when you're not criticizing it. Okay. So really, things get so much easier when you let go. And that's the beginnings of you getting dense. This is what makes you gravitational. This is what pulls her in from an emotional and energetic way. Okay. She can just feel it. Now you take that, like that basis, and your communication does the same thing. It's like all of the things that come out of you are an extension, an expression of that thing. Okay. So your voice is also gravitational. Your actions are gravitational. So you don't have to pull her, she's pulled. Right? There's a big difference between that and the pickup artist. You know what I'm saying? Because he's trying to pull her because he has no gravitational energy about him. He believes that he's not good enough. So he needs to learn all these skills and tactics and entrapments and, illusions and manipulation to get her to find interest in him, which is a really kind of a sad state where you take a girl who has medium or low interest and you spend time turning her resistance into interest. Like that's sad. That's really sad. It's one thing to use those tactics in, say, like something with business, and you're trying to close a deal, you're trying to get the person to work with you, but because you're on your last dollar, you need to make this deal. You need to make this sale because it's going to be the matter of like paying rents next month or, eating next week. So sure, I would say employ whatever you need to do to make that happen. All right. But if you take the same techniques, okay, because what's happening in that business deal, you've got need, you have hunger, you've got desire that has like a sense of survival behind it. Now, if you take that same behavior, the same tactics and the same motivation, but you apply it to women, now you've completely changed the pressure and the temperature of the interaction. You've now turned it into something related to survival because you think that like it must happen. Otherwise, why would you be using such tactics? Lines and skills and ways to get in her head and all this blah, blah, blah. Like, she's not on the hook. She's midway or she's low interest. And there's a lot of guys who they like that. They pride themselves on that. They're like, no, I kind of like it when a girl gives me some resistance or she kind of shows some disinterest. Why at all? And it makes me think that like perhaps guys have just never experienced what it's like to have a girl who actually likes them. And to that I would say, how would you expect a girl to like you if you're hiding from everyone, including yourself? Right? Look at the archetypes in the book. Are they hiding from anyone? They're not hiding from anybody. What did I say about from my essay about, the guy who leads, the guy who dominates her? The one who dominates her doesn't need to. The one who fucks her doesn't need to fuck her. The one who turns her brain to oatmeal doesn't need to do it. He doesn't need to do anything. He doesn't need her for anything. Nothing at all. She's just an extension of his expression. That's it. That's all she is. And that's not to belittle her, but that's more just like using symbolic language to understand the relationship between the two. that it's not a need place. And this is where you can actually start operating with some sense of authenticity. Because while you're in a state of need, you can't actually be authentic. Someone who's in a survival mode cannot be authentic. And there's, a lot of guys, they're in emotional survival mode. They're in emotional starvation. Just like the guy who is hungry for that deal to close. Like his bank account is starving. So you really have to look at these things from a position of, you got to look at these positions from the position of your level of hunger, right? If you're being motivated by hunger, then, well, you pretty much eat anything, wouldn't you? You'd take any deal, wouldn't you? Right? This is why when someone's very hungry, they will compromise their morals. They'll compromise their integrity. They'll steal that loaf of bread from the farmer's market, Like, that's what happens. And like, do you really want to be like that with regard to sex? Where you're just willing to consume anything because you believe that you're starving, right? And it is a belief, because you can't actually starve from a lack of sex, all right? Now, maybe someone could argue emotionally. Maybe you're emotionally starved. You're emotionally starved by having a lack of just female interaction, beyond some, dating app chat box. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not real female interaction. But where she's like touching you, she's touching your arm, she's touching the back of your neck, right? Like she's burying her face in your chest. Like, sure, there could be quite a bit of starvation for that. But I'm telling you that there is almost always something beneath multiple layers of why that desire is so, or when that desire is not met, why it's so painful, why it hurts so much, why there's such like this sense of emptiness. It'll be like a tightness. And there's often a more serious thing going on. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so hungry for these things, right? ST. Could maybe some guys experience it, but they possible didn't like her, or just didn't know how to handle the responsibilities of that type of relationship? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Some guys experience what? I don't know what the it part is. So if you could explain what it is, experienced it. The opening, where she opens to you. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Because if you're afraid, like, think about like a musician, right? How many songs do you think a musician writes if they are afraid to perform? I don't think they write quite as much as the person who is inspired to perform, who's excited to perform. I think that person probably writes more music than the person who's scared. So in that, the reason why I bring that up is that if you're scared of being judged, if you're scared of being rejected, at any stage, whether it's, introducing yourself or, making plans, whether you're having sex or you're, creating a scene, what have you, right? Anything along the way. If you have some reservations, if you're scared, it's going to lock up your creativity. I've known many artists who are like this, right? Visual artists, where they've said that the most intimidating thing is a blank page or a blank canvas. And they're afraid of making something ugly. And so, if you're afraid of making something ugly, you're pretty much, cutting off your own hands. You're not going to be able to create because you're afraid that someone's going to look at that and go, ugh. But the greatest artists of our time, they quickly moved past that stage. And they're like, no, fuck it. Like, I have to do what I want to do. I have to make this. I have to express myself. This is just what must be done. And they're not intimidated or scared of the canvas. And girls, absolutely, like when you are grounded and have conviction and vision, they absolutely are a canvas, because they have that develops the trust. Okay, because when that vampire comes in, the werewolf comes in, the pirate comes in, he's got such conviction in himself, in his own story of himself, that but there's not like a bravado sense of it with the idea that he's trying to convince others that he's that way. Right? It's more calm than that. There's no performance about it. Because if he was trying to convince others, that means he's not convinced himself. He needs help. Is this real? Let me show you. Do you think it's real? And they'll say yes or no in other means, giving, support or rejection. So the thing is that, it's in having that high level of conviction that, it allows her to trust better. It's hard to trust someone when you can smell doubt on them. And it smells worse when you can tell that they're trying hard to cover it up. Like everybody knows what it looks like. But guys, they have this compulsion to try to cover up what it is that they think nobody can see. That's the funny part. Like everyone can see you when you're trying to cover it up. It's not hard. Like it's easy to see when things are off about someone's behavior, their demeanor, their voice, their style. Like you can tell when someone's trying hard. Okay. Versus being around someone who feels authentic and you're like, yeah, like you can just get this sense of that they're just comfortable in their own skin. They're not trying to perform for someone or impress someone. They're not holding back, but they're also not trying to be overt with too much. Okay. And there's no like shock value happening there or whatever. They just they are what they are. And you get this sense of acceptance. So when someone has acceptance of themselves and they're calm about it, they're not trying to prove anything or defend anything or justify anything, then it's a lot easier for you to accept them. Even if you don't agree with what they are. You're just like, oh, like, yeah, they're just so comfortable that you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Because that relieves tension coming at you. But if they're trying to justify their identity, if they're trying to defend their identity or explain their identity or show off their identity, then that's energy going out that then, hits you, and then you have to do something with it. Right? If they're settled with themselves, then there's nothing coming out. It just is. Like a tree. It's not like trying to justify its existence. It just is. And I've been around people who are like that, and it's a relaxing sensation being around them, which causes you to relax. So imagine with the soft skills and the perceptive nature of women, how their system just automatically feels. It has these like little tendrils that feel out energetically of how people are, because they constantly have to read. Okay. And not with a conscious mind. Well, sometimes with a conscious mind, but always with the subconscious. and instinct. They're always reading because they just genetically, over many generations, just don't have the brute force. They don't have the bone density. They don't have the amount of muscle fibers. Men, they have like I think more fast twitch muscle fibers. Our eyes are geared to track moving objects better than women's eyes. So like we're geared for different things. Okay. So in order for them to survive, other skills had to develop, other abilities and powers. And part of that was really being able to feel their way through people and situations to then know how to navigate through them unscathed, because they just don't have the brawn to deal with it otherwise. So it's a very interesting skill. Okay. But this is also what allows them to be receptive, right? Because that's what that is. It's receptive. Receptors are going all over the place, reading and feeling. So if you come in and you don't have that, you have more of like that tree energy. You've accepted yourself. And she's like, I'm not really reading anything off of this guy except comfort. Like there's nothing, he's not trying to push anything, not trying to pull anything. He's not trying to justify or show off or pull me towards or defend. There's nothing. He just is. And that's totally like an anomaly to her sensors. Because it's like the only time that's like an inanimate object or something like that, right? There's no read off of you except just calm, okay? And that gains attention. It's like, oh, like what's with this guy? And then you talk to her, and because of that receptive stuff, and because you're not trying to push, you're not trying to pull, you're not trying to justify, prove, show off, none of that stuff. Now your words are being able to be picked up by her receptors, the emotional receptors, the subconscious receptors, the conscious receptors, like all that stuff that's reading you, okay, from an instinctual level. That is all being altered in a way because you're not like everybody else. You're not like all these other guys who are trying to like weasel their way past and through like her sensory system, through her nervous system. That's really what we're talking about here. And so when her nervous system doesn't have anything to read, right? Like in terms of like, this is dangerous, or he wants this thing, or like, there's no strong information to read. It's like, oh, this is unique, right? And it's kind of relieving. There's a bit of a change there. And then through your words, now you can start giving her emotions, feelings, and impulses that are atypical. Because your communication can be completely different. You're not trying to pull anything from her. Remember the guy from my paper, he doesn't need her. He doesn't need her for anything. And so it's like, there's a big difference between offering food to a starving man and offering food to a man who's got a full belly, a full fridge. Like, it's totally different. And so, like, or when they approach food, right? It's totally different. He's not trying to get it quickly into his stomach so that he can feel satiated. There's none of that. So feeding that person, it becomes a totally different experience. They can actually enjoy, right? Because they're not in a rush. They're not trying to fill their gullet. You know what I mean? They can actually enjoy. They can actually chew their food. And then, and this is where it becomes torturous and fun, right? I'm reminded of that movie, Ratatouille, right? That animated film about the rat that knows who's a chef, and he like lives inside the what do they call it? A toque or togue? That tall French chef hat, silly looking things. And he was making the guy cook by pulling on his hair, right? And there was this guy, the restaurant critic, okay, in France or in Paris, and everyone was scared of him. And because he was such a hard critic, very difficult to please. And he said, he's like, I don't like food. He was having an interview, and he's like, oh, you must really like food. Or no, it was the hero of the story asking him that, and he's like, no, I don't like food. I love it. And then what did he say? He's like, if I don't love it, I don't swallow, or something like that. And it was very shocking in the sense that he's like, I'm willing to put it in my mouth, but I'll chew it up. But if I don't like it, I'm going to spit it out. I don't give a fuck. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've made. I don't care about any of that shit. Right. And so that comes from a person who's not in need. Okay. He's not in need to eat. He's not starving. Doesn't care. So he can really judge and think and assess and, maybe not that character, but also have fun with it. So this is when you can say, I can just put you in my mouth, chew you, roll you around on the palate for a little bit. And that just all makes her want to be swallowed all the more. And when I say this, it's her essence, like her presence, to be swallowed by you, to be taken up by you. And this just increases that fantasy, right? The fantasy of want to be taken, to want to be used, to be treated like an object, to be expanded, to be stretched. Okay. And stretched, I don't mean just like her sexual parts. I mean like that, but also stretched in terms of her emotions, stretched in terms of her psyche. Okay. And then she's getting this sense like, okay, I think maybe he can, but he's not in any rush. In fact, I'm not even sure he's going to or not. And that just makes her want it to happen more. There's this story, and I'm thinking about putting some of my erotic literature for sale on the website. Maybe it's like a whole pack, or sell them individually. I'm not sure yet. But I got this one where this girl, she was really horny. She really wanted to get some action, and she's trying all these different things. She was going out. She went to this place, that place, whatever. Nothing was working out. And then she remembered there was this guy that she'd like matched with like some time ago, like weeks or months ago. And like on Tinder or something like that. And she gets with him, and they just meet up, and he has that vibe. He has the pirate, the vampire, whatever it is. It just happens to be this dude. But remember, I was talking about the underlying current, right? Doesn't need her. He wants her. She's cute. She's sexy. He likes to have fun too. But like, he could very well just go back to sleep. He doesn't care, And so like they meet up and stuff like that. And then they, have a couple drinks or whatever. I think they go to her place and, or his place. Yeah, it was his place. And he just begins to torture her. But not by like, sticking needles in her muscles or something like that. Nothing like that. He just tortures her emotionally, because he realizes that her desire is increasing. He could smell the desire on her, probably like literally as well. I don't remember. I wrote it some time ago. And so he's like, oh, okay. Like, I have complete leverage here. And I'm going to twist the knife just because I can. And so he gets her all, and he's like, listen, you're going to follow my directions and so on. And then they were like kissing and so on. And he's like, you know what? I'm not into it. Why don't you just like grab your stuff and go? And she's like, what? What do you mean? Go. No, please. Like, she's like she's like so wanting to get fucked at this point. Like, she's just soaked. Okay. I think she still has her clothes on at this point. I don't remember. And he's like, yeah, it's like, I've changed my mind. And she's like, no, please, just stay. She's like holding his dick in her hand. He's like, please, just like, please fuck me, And then he just keeps doing this. He gives her a little bit, and then he recedes. Gives her a little bit, and then recedes. Right? And at one point, he basically has her, like, alternating between like fucking her pussy with a dildo and then cleaning it with her mouth, and then back to the pussy, back to her mouth, just back and forth. And he's not even touched her yet. Okay. And she's just like basically saying like, okay, I'm going to obey this stuff because like if I do, like maybe I'll eventually earn some actual dick, you know? And so he gets like this, like a remote controlled vibrator, like a plug basically. And it puts in her ass. Or actually, I think he makes her put it in. And then he, climbs on top of her, inserts his dick into her pussy, and he instructs her, don't move. He says, don't move. And then at that point, he uses a remote and he turns on the vibrator that's in her ass. And of course, now it's like, holy fuck. And she really wants to, and she like shifts her hips and all this stuff. And even the littlest bit, he turns it off. He's like, all right, get up. You can't follow directions. So we're ending this here. And she's like, no, please no. And like, he pushes it just a little bit further and she just breaks down. She's crying, now she's really opening up. Emotions are letting loose. All of her frustration from, the months of just everything. Okay. Just starts coming out. And now he's like, starts up again, and, then the same position, same thing. He's like, all right, fine, whatever. And he doesn't move except like the tiniest bit of movement of his dick. Right. And just gets her like raising until she has an orgasm that's so strong that she's never had an orgasm like that before. Like, first of all, like from her ass, but also in such an unusual way. And then there's other parts that continues on, but I say that to illustrate how the power of just everything that I'm talking about, like letting go of your hunger. Okay. Like if he had self-doubt, the character in my story, if he had self-doubt, could he have done that? Could he have moved the way he moved, thought clearly the way he did, having the conviction of just, he wasn't playing a game. He was absolutely 100% willing to make her leave and then just go to sleep. Once that door shuts, click, okay, lights out. Going to sleep. Don't give a fuck. There's that conviction, and she can smell that. She can smell whether you're playing a little bit or whether you're dead fucking serious. And there's a massive difference in the mood. Remember that the feelers, right? The receptors that she's picking up on, all these subtle cues, communications, tone, body language, all this stuff. She's all reading this, right? Mostly not consciously. And it's all translating into how she feels. And so, he's doing these things and she's getting ushered into this full-on emotional experience. And then he's willing to drop a gate right in front of that, a steel gate that's 12 inches thick, and saying, no, I don't care. Leave. And not to be cruel, but because he's just like, no, this is going in the direction that I want it to go. You're going to have to pay attention. You're going to have to listen. And it's a very powerful thing. Very, very powerful. Okay. Now, of course, he knew that her body and emotions would respond the way they did. Okay. But he would have no problem just letting her leave and putting the lights out and going to sleep. And so it's like all of these things, that freedom opens up the possibility for creativity to express yourself sexually, utilize ideas, go with your instinct. Okay. Control timing, controlling pressure, controlling tension, and not being rushed by anything. I mean, he literally he put his dick inside her and just stayed there. Said, look at me. Keep your eyes on me. Don't fucking move. And then just sit there. in that tension, making me want like, what the fuck? Because now I know if I move, he's going to cut everything off. I can't protest. If I argue, if I complain, if I whine, who knows what he'll do? I don't know. I remember in the story. No, that's what he did. So there's these gags. It's like a short dildo gag, right? And there's like a leather or vinyl, like a square plate that goes over the mouth, and then there's a strap that goes around the back, and then attached to the front, instead of being a ball or a ring or whatever, it's this like short dildo. Maybe they come in different lengths actually, so you can like 2 inches, 3 inches, 5 inches, whatever. And so you have that, and it's like shoves inside their mouth, and you just tie or buckle it behind their neck. And he put this on her, so she couldn't talk either. So she's sitting there like basically like all 3 of her holes are just like full, and there's no stroking action, there's no pounding, there's none of that stuff. I mean, eventually she does get it. She gets, she gets the hell pounded out of her. But just the build of that tension and saying, look, everything's full, but we're not doing anything about it, but it's doing everything to you. And it's just fanning the flames greater and greater. Like the bellows you see in the old cartoons, and they go psh, psh, and they push they collapse that accordion thing, and it pushes air on the fire. It's just doing that over and over and over again by literally doing nothing. The power of stillness. Well, Ken's got a question for me. All right, this girl says, how much of a woman's fantasy comes from her nature, and how much is shaped by the way society teaches her desire, Daddy? That's a really good question. I don't know how much, but I would say that both are active. It's a mixture of the nature versus nurture. I think that very much of her core requires containment, right? Requires that fluidity, that movement to be contained, right? And so, it's contained with, buckles, straps, gags, by the man's energy, okay, by his presence, by his words. And so I think they're wanting that, just the base feeling. I think the base feeling is innate. And then how that looks from like a shaped perspective, that I think comes from society, culture, and other sources of influence. Thank you for the question. Women aren't used to men teasing them sexually. Of course. Right. Because the women they're so used to being in a position of power. And from what I'm describing here, okay, imagine how having that energy, that identity, that sense of self inside, okay, that really, really wants to come out and be and relax and just express itself, like show up authentically. But man after man after man after man after man, I mean, and that's blaspheme. So male after male after male after male is doing things that not only don't access that, but they do the direct opposite. Instead of bringing her to a place of relaxed submission, openness, vulnerability, is putting her into a position of authority, where she then has to deal with him basically saying without saying, the guy says, I really want what you have. Can I have what you have? Can I have some? Can I get some of that? Right? And it's put into that basic, script is like translated into a whole host of words and lines and actions and things like that. But they're all just begging for the same thing. They're all asking for permission to get between her legs. And the second that's engaged, it puts her in a position of power. Automatically, it shoots her up lightning fast onto a throne, zaps a scepter in her hand, puts a crown on her head, and she's like now put in this position of having to make decisions of what to do with this guy in front of her. And it's like, hey, maybe, maybe he's cute, maybe he's charming, cool, like maybe he's got a big dick, he smells good, I like the sound of his voice or whatever. And so maybe she might give him a chance, right? Allow him, and she can kind of like potentially, or like, temporarily forget that he's lacking in the true essence to bring her to where she actually wants to be. All right. So there's like some trade-off. It's like, okay, so he's not really a man, but like he's cute, or he's not really a man, but he can put us up into like the best, most expensive penthouse in New York City for the night or whatever. He's not a man, but I love the sound of his voice, right? He's not a man, but boy, he smells good. He's not a man, but he's a little popular. So, that'll be cool. Like he's like, like maybe locally famous or something like that. So there's always this trade-off, but she knows, like her core knows, her instinct, her deep, like animal instinct knows that this is not the way it is, knows that he's not a man. And she has to ignore those things or make a deal with herself or something like that, and saying, okay, we're going to compromise in this situation. Now, they don't all do that, but I'm saying some women will do that. Others will stay true and be like, no, this is not a man. I'm not wasting my time with this. Like, and it gets exposed so easily, so quickly, so obviously. The second you're just like, oh, I want what you have, immediately she's given leverage. She doesn't even have to take leverage. It just manifests in her hands by way of you saying, I want sex from you. But the thing, based on the stories, the fantasies, and how women actually feel, is that the persona that really wakes her up, that turns her on, right, lights up her subconscious, lights up that instinct, actually makes her wet, comes from someone who doesn't have that desire. Now, of course, he's heterosexual. It's not like he's gay or anything, but it doesn't lead him. It doesn't influence him. Now, it can inspire him, okay? It can inspire him to create something out of her being pulled towards you. And that's entirely different. But this is something that, can only be cultivated when she does not have leverage over you. Now, there's something, there's a huge difference of picturing a man on his knees in front of a woman saying, please, can I fuck? And a woman on her knees saying, please fuck me. It's like night and day. Night and day. And so this is what the vast majority of guys do without really like overtly saying this. They're all saying in one way or another, please, can I fuck? And it's pathetic. And so either the girls see that and they go, ugh, that's pathetic. My pussy feels like a desert right now. Or, and actually they'll be completely disconnected from their body. Their body will not activate in that way. It'll just be right up in their head. Emotion will just be of repulsion, disgust, or just nothing, complete neutral. Or it's just seen as like an opportunity. And some girls will see you that way. That's just an opportunity to use you. And it's like, hey, like, can you blame me if they're just lying down in front of me and saying, please use me? You experience that over and over and over and over, year after year, for many years, I think eventually the girl's going to be like, yeah, well, let's just let me like, he really wants to take me out. So fine. You know, like I don't blame them. I really don't. You know, I'm not like the morality police. Yes. That woman will probably never experience that again, especially that type of orgasm. Why? Why do you say that? You mean the girl from my story? No, she'll call him again. Yeah, she's definitely got him as like a, you know, her like break glass in case of emergency type thing, you know. Yeah. And a fine semper to you too, Cody. Thank you, darling. Yes, Cody does have a birthday coming up. Yep. Yeah. Mr. James, good to see you, man. But how do you not have that if it's hard for you to get sex? How do you not have what? Because you know, we get to talking and you got to be more concise with your language. But how do you not have that if it's hard for you to get sex? Well, you know, it's funny. There was a friend of mine. He wasn't like quite a coach. You know, he's more of like just a content creator, and he talked about dating a lot. And he said that, and he said, he's like, man, you know, he's talking to men. And he's like, guys, it's fucking cold out here. It's a cold world for men. And he was doing this live stream. You know, I kind of like put him on the spot, and I like put a message in the live chat, and I said, hey, the world only feels cold when you are trying to seek warmth from it. And he was like, oh shit. And it kind of like just kind of gave him a little bop on the head, you know. But it kind of woke him up a little bit, because that's the only reason why there feels to be that lack of warmth or a difficulty in getting sex, right? It only feels difficult because you're trying to get something. You see what I'm saying? There's that hunger. So it's the hunger that's making it difficult, right? So like, if I could be, as an example, something really out there. Okay, like if I wanted to become a Formula One racer, that would be a really difficult. I would feel the anxiety and the pressure. Let's just, for some reason, at my age, I said, you know what? Fuck doing what I'm doing. I'm taking all my money and I'm sinking it into training to be a Formula One racer. I really want to be a Formula One racer. The chances of that happening are slim to none. Okay? Like those guys, they start when they're like little tykes driving cars on a track in Europe. It's not going to happen. Like I'd have a greater chance of being struck by lightning 5 times. So, but me putting that there, that scenario, okay, and how it contrasts with reality, the desire is what causes that friction. It causes that tension. Okay. So, you know, it's considered to be one of the 3 poisons that causes suffering, according to the Buddhists. Okay, so you have craving, you've got hatred, and you've got ignorance. Those are the 3 Buddhist poisons. And if you look at each of those things, that's basically where all of our suffering comes from: craving, hatred, and ignorance. So if you can, the real reason why like that's considered to be hard, you know, say like it's hard, right? It's because of that craving. If the craving is not there, then can I say it's hard to be a Formula One driver? No. It's only because I have a craving that, and on top of that, an attachment to some sort of outcome and what that will do to me, right? But that what will do to me is part of subconscious. That's the only reason why I have the tension. If then the next day I said, you know what? I'm no longer craving being a Formula One driver. Then immediately, boom, that suffering is gone. That suffering is completely gone. It's only in the craving that creates the suffering. So, and the reason why I chose Formula One is because that's not a necessary aspect of living. Okay. It's hard to do that to like food or oxygen, water, stuff like that. Like you need that stuff. Okay. But like having sex, there's ascetics that choose not to have sex and they never have sex their entire lives. Doesn't care. They don't care. They just fucking sit in a cave, playing with beads or whatever they do. I don't know. Making sand mandalas. They do, like all those guys in the East, they do some weird stuff. The Tibetans, they do these in giant mandalas. I don't know if you've seen, what mandalas are, but there's these like celestial sort of patterns, very geometric and stuff, very detailed. And these monks will get together and they'll create them on the ground, huge, really, really big, out of sand, making with these special applicators, like a cone-shaped tube, and they just feed the sands down into it. And they'll spend weeks or months making these giant things. And then once it's completed, they don't take any pictures or anything, just pull out their brooms and just sweep it up. It's gone. They also have they make these butter sculptures, these like really tall butter sculptures of like deities and whatever, Buddhas or what have you. And they'll spend weeks on them, just carving them out of cold butter, inside like these cold temples. And then once they're done, they're on these like platforms with wheels. They'll wheel them out into the sun and then just let them melt. So, and it's all like an act of conditioning oneself to be all right with non-attachment. Okay. And just letting things go. You sigh. And you just do that with everything, including your desire and probably convinced belief need for sex. Okay. And you just let it go. Not a sad sigh, just a plain sigh, an objective sigh. And that gets you along. Okay. Because it's like I said, it's the very thing that you desire is going to produce the opposite of what you're after. Even if you get the girl, even if you fuck the girl, okay, it's not going to be the same. So like in my story, like if he really wanted to fuck, it would have altered how she was showing up. There was something magical about the fact that he was in control of his desire. It wasn't moving him. She wasn't moving him. Nothing was moving him. And there's something really erotic about that. About a man who's just immovable. He's a mountain. He just is. He's a giant fucking oak tree. And it's supremely arousing on like a very foundational, primal, core level inside a woman. And it creates intrigue. But the thing is, the trick is that you can't manufacture this. You can try, but your behaviors will deceive you. Or your behaviors will, what do they call that? They'll be like mutiny. You know what I mean? They'll expose you. Their words will expose you. And remember the soft skills, women can pick up on this stuff. They can pick up on whether you're authentically still or you're just trying to play games so that she can think a certain thing about you and then she can get into her pants. Yeah. You said it's pathetic guys basically are begging for sex without overtly saying it. I'm talking about that desperate energy. Yeah. Yeah. It is pathetic. It's not becoming of manhood to be begging for sex. It's not becoming of manhood to be basically asking anything from a woman. And this is just plain. There's no judgment or feelings on the matter with regard to women. It's just plain. It's zero. Not positive, not negative. It's not praising, it's not degrading. None of that. She can have her praise and degradation later. But before then, no, it's just plain. You know what I mean? It's having no position, no feeling, no judgment, no criticism, no hope, no projection, nothing. It's just nothing. And I was talking to some people today. I was in a clubhouse room, and there was guys and girls on the stage, and I was describing my mindset and my relationship, and I said, when it comes to women, and this one guy who's like, oh, trying to correct her language, and I said, I don't bother with that, because I regard all women as like just a neutral NPC. It's no judgment in either direction, not high, low, nothing. Okay, it just is like, like as if I'm seeing like a squirrel, right, or a raccoon or a dolphin. It's just, I don't have an opinion, right? It's just something that's here. It's not good or bad. And then he was like, well, why wouldn't you correct them? Having them call you sir or something like that. And I said, well, because that's energy that I'm going to expend in the direction of a woman who's not underneath me. I don't mean underneath me sexually, but under my tutelage, under my guidance, under my attention. This one here, I pay attention to everything she says and does, everything she thinks and feels. That requires work. It takes work to pay attention to things. And then sometimes it needs correction, sometimes it needs guidance, sometimes it needs approval, sometimes it needs praise, sometimes it needs punishment. And all of that is work. So why would I do that to some girl that I don't even know, who hasn't proven to me that she's, and I don't mean this in a, in like a, disrespectful way, but like she hasn't proven to me that she's worth that time. And by worth that time, like showing me the enthusiasm, showing me the curiosity, showing me the open-mindedness, showing me the sexual attraction, and showing me the ability to take direction. Right? That's my 5 criteria. She's not showing me any of that stuff. And here I am trying to correct her language. It doesn't make sense. That's like trying to grade somebody's paper when they haven't joined your class yet at university. And you're like, wait, like, you're not even in my class yet. I'm not going to judge your performance. Enroll first. Stick around for a little while. I'll assess you. I'll quiz you. We'll see what's going on. And then we'll see. But yeah, it's quite pathetic when when guys are begging for sex. You shouldn't really, except from a biological level of saying like, all right, I want children, right? That might be like that's not even a need. That's maybe a predisposed genetic need, right? Because our genes are programmed to say procreate, right? Replicate. That's what all living beings do. So you might consider that a need, but is something that's programmed a need? I'm not sure. A need for survival of the species, maybe, but it's nothing you actually feel as a need, right? Usually, when we think about family creation and procreation, it's more of on the desire level. I want a family. I want a son. I want a daughter. I want to create a family. So, but aside from that, like, what could you possibly need from a woman? It just doesn't compute. And most of the time, when guys say they want this or they need that, if you start talking and you start peeling away the layers, right? Start examining the words that they use, which is an indication of how they think, how they perceive, what their beliefs are. A lot of it comes down to their emotional needs. And if you start kind of sifting through that and you start getting down into the bottom of that, okay, because remember I said the kingdom of man, his throne, is down in the depths. That's where you actually are. So you start digging around in there to see where he really is. And there's pain, there's loss, there's fear, beliefs that he came to understand that really aren't true, but to him they feel true. And that created a whole reality for him. Based on, maybe how a parent treated him or something along those lines. And so it's like, but you kind of traverse that all the way up really quick, and you think it's about certain things. Oh, I want sex. No, it's because if we trail it all the way back down into the dark realms where your throne is to be carved, it really has to do with loss. It really has to do with a hole being rendered a long time ago that was never really tended to because, maybe nobody showed you or, kind of helped you heal, or in your adult life, like showed you how to do it. Okay. And how to examine and how to really nurture the self. Okay. So that hole gets filled. So instead of doing that, we use other people for that. We use them. Over and over, and it never works out. Never. Unless you come across someone who has the same codependency that you have. And so you have these two codependent people who have like seamlessly worked out a mutually beneficial relationship, but it's entirely dependent. It's really kind of messed up. Okay. Now, truth be told, like at the core, there is like an elemental, energetic or spiritual need around the core of a woman. Okay, because in that, it's fluid. What it seeks is containment. Okay, and without the containment, there's a bit of loss. There's a bit of like uncertainty. So with girls, there is a bit of that, I think, like dependency on form. Okay. But at the same time, it's like the completeness of a container, like it kind of like fulfills its role, right? Is when something is placed in a container. So on the same token, you could say it's the same for the core of a man. But anyways, I digress. But yeah, you should really examine like why you think, as a man, you should examine why you think that you need a woman, right? And if you keep digging, you'll find that it really has nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with her touch. It has everything to do with some old ass feeling that you've been carrying around for a long time that needs to be attended to. Some belief, usually about yourself, that if you examine it, it probably doesn't hold water. It's just something you came to understand and, justify until it just over time, it kind of like calcified, and which then made it seem dense enough to consider real, but it's not. It can be chipped away and eventually it just crumbles. But if you don't want a particular thing, then how do we as men set goals, objectives, and have a direction in life? That's completely different. That has to do with me and me only. Okay. I'm not saying don't want anything. Okay. It's women. It's not a particular thing. It's women. And they are distinctly different than goals, objectives, and direction, vision, and all that stuff. Because that has to do with you personally. Okay. But because we have this thing around, there's a lot of complex tapestries between how men and women like interact, both on a conscious and subconscious level, on a spiritual level, on an energetic level. There's so many layers to the cloth between us that we can't just kind of like oversimplify it in something like this. It's a different category in and of itself. Because of like what I said, we bring our past with us. Most people do. They're not just here like, oh, I'm here as I am. And my past is not on me like some fucking rotting backpack. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like trying to wave the flies away, and spray cologne to kind of hide the smell. Like, no, this is perfectly fine. Don't mind that. you know? But when you can't ever really get rid of the backpack, but you can get rid of the rot and the flies. Okay. And that comes through saying, okay, I'm going to take this off, actually acknowledge that it's on me, open it up, and start really examining what you carry. Okay. And there could be just rotting nonsense that's in there. And, and you can get rid of it or fix it or heal it or whatever needs to happen to change the state of rot. Okay. It could just be broken, could be misaligned, could be out of adjustment, whatever it is. Okay. Because not everything that that's part of your shadow is worth casting away. You know what I'm saying? Some things just need a different perspective. And then it changes everything. Okay. And so now you're not, the things you carry, you're not trying to hide them from the other person. You're not trying to hide it from a woman. Like, again, why would you be hiding from a little girl? You know what I'm saying? You're not. What you're hiding from is yourself. Because if she recognizes something in you, then that means it's obvious. And if it's obvious, then it becomes recognized by yourself. You acknowledge that it's there and you'd rather not. So why don't you just cut out all that bullshit, simplify it, and start acknowledging what it is that we carry, okay? And then work on that knee-jerk response of saying, I don't like this. This is shit. This makes me sad. I hate this. I hate me. And then the spiral, okay? Like, work on removing that step because it doesn't do you any good. That's actually an ego response that keeps you still. It keeps you where you are. Okay. Much like that scene that I talk about with in Lord of the Rings, when Gollum is by himself, right? And like the two halflings are sleeping, okay, like Frodo and whatever his name is, Samwise. And they're all like he's like leading them into Mordor. And he's having this argument with himself. And he's like, the dark side of him comes out, no, you can't trust them. Tricksy hobbitses, right? And then he and he's like, no, they're good, they're friends, like I love them, they love me, like they're totally cool. And then he would snap back, because that's the feeling, that's the anger, that's the fear, that's the pain, right? And saying, no, we don't need to change, we want to stay right here, even in the face of looking at that stuff, because that's like, oh no, the light's on. And you start looking at these things to learn to accept them. And then there's that knee-jerk response of getting sad that's the state, like that's like the hand you've been dealt. And instead of just saying, oh, this is what I have, it turns into this emotional response of just even more rejection. So that's like the dark Gollum, be like, no, they're evil, bad, tricksy hobbitses. Tricksy hobbitses. So you got to fight that. Okay. Like, don't allow that to come into the mix. And this is the beginnings of becoming whole. Okay. Like it's funny. See, we were talking about fantasy and all this stuff, and oh, look at all these sexy girls. Like, ooh, that ass. Just take the fucking cane and a nice red stripe across, making her beg for this stuff, the feeling of that rope on her skin, right? But there's like such more important things. And then all of this stuff becomes easy. It becomes a second thought, right? It just becomes an extension. There's nothing really, I don't know, there's nothing really to do, In your opinion, what's the difference between sex addiction and having a high sex drive? Respect to you. Really great job. Well, thanks, James Jr. Um, I'm glad you put the junior in there because we already have a James. So we got James and James Jr. Well, there is people with high sex drive. There are some people who are like that, and it's hard to say because it's some people have a high sex drive due to biology. Okay, it's just that way. Okay, their hormones are in such a way, maybe like dopamine receptors in their brain are in such a way that they become addicted to the, just how they feel, like on a biochemical level. Okay. And that's just like how it is. And it's not like a real addiction. Okay. It's just like their body has a very strong response towards sex. Okay. And they have just a very high drive. I would say that's a small portion of the population that have this, let's just call it like a genetic, adaptation or mutation. Okay. I think for the most part, people who have a high sex drive is actually a high sex drive. And it's probably something emotional that's fulfilling. Okay. Fulfilling something. And then they kind of like, call it a high sex drive. Okay. Because think about it, like not many people sit down with themselves and really start peeling away themselves, right? Unless they have to, right? They're in such a psychological or emotional trouble that they have to seek therapy and, that sort of thing. But most people aren't just going to sit down and go, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to start examining myself on a daily or weekly basis, start tracking stuff, see where my thoughts go, start examining things and see what I can do about aligning things that just, maybe aren't adding up. Not most people aren't doing that, especially guys. Okay. Because most guys are like this. They hear like a squeak or something in their car. They'll ignore it until the squeak becomes a clunk, and then the clunk becomes a crack. And they're like, maybe I need to call a tow company now and bring it to the shop. Okay. Most guys are like, I'm feeling a little soreness in my tooth. Yeah, right, whatever. And then they keep going and going and going. And then the rot becomes so much that the tooth fucking cracks. And they're like, okay, I think I need to see a dentist. and the dentist goes, why didn't you come to me when this was a tiny cavity? It could have taken care of in a half an hour. Now we have to do a full-on root canal with a crown. And, it's costing, 5 times as much and it's take 5 times as long. Like that's how guys are. Okay. Like I was a personal trainer a long time ago. I didn't have many male clients. I had all female clients. Okay. And it's not because I'm cute. It's because girls, a lot of times they'll have that mentality of like, okay, there's a problem. I want to fix it. Like, especially when it comes to their body image. Absolutely. Okay. Maybe not so much when it comes to their mind. I think that depends on the person, but with their image, a lot of times they're like, yes, I'm getting on this. Okay. Guys that I trained with, they weren't like in a great place. It was like, oh my gosh, my knees are sore. My back is sore. I went to help my buddy move and I could barely help him pick up the couch. It's like they get to this point where they're like, I'm fucked. I'm at the bottom of the barrel now. I need to do something. Okay. They wait till they're fucking zeroed out in their relationships. They wait until they're having sex once a month, if that, to then really start engaging with the fucking problem. They wait until they're a mess till they call me and say, I've tried everything. I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. Everything that I've tried has failed. Like that's typically how guys work, And so boy, that went off on a fucking tangent, didn't it? Sorry, James. But so as far as like actual sex addicts, it's a really small portion of the population. Okay. There's not very many sex addicts. High sex drive is probably a small subset of people who have the biological makeup for a high sex drive from like a biochemical standpoint. And then the rest of the bulk of people who have a high sex drive are actually in that way due to strong emotional attachments that have nothing to do with sex whatsoever. And it's the people who don't want to look into things, don't want to examine anything. They're the first ones to say, that's just whatever. Like, it's just about sex. And I'm telling you, sex is never about sex. It's about either all kinds of emotional shit that we carry around with us, or if you're in like a more healed place, sex is about power. That's all it is. And then everything else in life is about sex. Advertising is about sex. Politics is about sex. Poetry is about sex. All these things are about sex. This, what I'm doing right now, this is about sex. That interplay. But actual sex is an expression of power. Glad you're understanding it better, James. Yep. What's up? Thank you for the question. Are there any supplements or vitamins that you take for sex or overall health? Well, I'll tell you this. I'm not a believer in multis. Like, I don't like the idea of multivitamins. Because if you take like the individual stuff, okay, say you look at like, C, A, E, B, all the, like just all the basic vitamins that you might take, magnesium, all the stuff. And you were to take the proper amounts, okay, because most of the time what's on the bottle is not really, it's usually like underdosed. And I think they do that just for like safety reasons or whatever. But if you're like, take actual doses and then take all those, put them in a bowl, like release them from the capsules. There's no fucking way that the vitamin would be like the size. It would be a massive fucking vitamin. It'd be huge. Or you'd have to take multiples of the multi. So it just doesn't make sense. I'd rather just take like the individual things that I think I need and do that, But strictly for sex, what I would suggest is stuff that has to do with blood flow and vascularity. There were two things that I take. I forget one of them, but one of them is hawthorn berry. And I believe hawthorn berry, it's just an extract that I take in liquid form. And what this does is it helps with the elasticity of your blood vessels. And so that's the thing that actually allows for good blood flow. Okay. So the problem that like guys have, like with when they have ED, and it's not like a psychological thing. Let's say it's a physiological thing. The problem with ED or like maintaining erections is that there's a problem with blood flow. All right. And that's why they take vasodilators such as Cialis or Viagra, because what those do is they open up those blood vessels so more blood can flow through. Okay. But I think one of the real issues that's not really being addressed is the strength and the elasticity of blood vessels. Okay. And just over time, they just get softer. And so it's just important to, take things that help support that. The other thing that I would suggest is for guys is to do their own Kegels, right? Is to flex their perineum. It's the same basic movement that you do when you're like, say like controlling your urine stream. Okay. But you just do that like on your own. And there's all sorts of different methods. You can look them up online. Like you hold it for a while and then release and kind of do sets like that. Other people just say like, just keep flexing it constantly, as like a high rep sort of training. So you can look into that, but it's the, your pelvic floor basically. And that is something that helps with like the strength of your orgasms, like your ability to like shoot, right? And just like overall health of like the prostate and things like that. One other supplement that I would suggest for guys to try is this stuff called Load Boost. And the problem with it is that it's pretty expensive. Okay. So what you could do is you look at the ingredients of Load Boost and just buy the separate parts. And it's nothing, it's like bromelain, which is a It's the thing. It's a supplement taken from pineapple. All right. So the bromelain that you take, it changes the taste, right, of your semen. And then there's like sunflower lectin is in there. There's zinc and copper, and you should always take copper with zinc. I forget the reason why, but they need to work synergistically. Like zinc either has no effect or has like a negative effect if you just take it on its own. And then I think a couple of other things. And you take it for like, I took like the load boost for a little while, and like you take it for like maybe like after 3 weeks, you have to take it every single day. And after like 3 weeks, there is absolutely a noticeable difference in volume. So if you're that type of person who's like, I want to like just fucking cover her face, right? You want that to happen, get this stuff load boost, or just look online and just get the separate stuff, and take that. But yeah, that stuff's good. It's a great product just altogether, but just the problem is that it's expensive. Yeah. I just say positive on a day-to-day basis, how to keep your spirits high. I don't keep my spirits high. I keep my spirits neutral. No high, no low. Okay. And that just has to do with acceptance, right? Non-resistance of what is. And you can control your thoughts by utilizing the hatchet and the compass, that sort of mentality, right? Which is the hatchet just stops unwanted behavior, unwanted thoughts, unwanted words, and the compass is used to redirect those thoughts. And initially, I came up with this as a means of checking a woman's behavior. Okay, so let's say anything from she misuses some grammar, or she says some words like that are inappropriate, or she has a tone that's inappropriate. You take out the hatchet, which is a fast moving tool. Okay. It's not as hefty as an axe, but it's very quick, and you quickly use that and you stop the behavior. You stop the tone or the attitude, you correct the grammar, whatever it is. Okay. Usually it's something spoken. Sometimes it can be behavioral, and you stop it on the spot. You put up that barrier, that you set that boundary or remind of that boundary, and then you use the compass and you say, this is what should be done here. This is what I expect to hear. This is what I expect to see. And you correct them word for word what should be said. Okay. Or action by action, what should be done. And you're just very fucking clear and very plain. Okay. Now, the same sort of thing when it comes to behavior, thought patterns, moods, and all that stuff. If you can apply it to on the outside, you can apply it to the inside. So you can apply this to yourself. The thing pops up, the negative thought. First, all you got to do is just start recognizing it. Recognition is the first step to eliminating threats. Okay. You can't eliminate a threat if you don't see it. So you need to just start recognizing a pattern. Okay. Maybe start thinking of paying attention to if there's any pattern to like what sets it off. Okay. Like is there a precursor to the mood shift, to the negative self-speak or what have you? Okay. So after you just spend some time observing, not judging, nothing, just kind of make mental note or maybe note in a small notepad and keep track of it. Then you can start seeing a pattern, and then you can start addressing what perhaps triggers those things. If there isn't, then you just start using the hatchet, and you don't allow that kind of speech. You don't allow those moods. You don't allow for you to, get into those states, right? And this is part of the first stages of self-mastery. Okay. Because if you can manage your mind, manage your moods, okay, so that you can create a sense of stillness, so you can create that mountain mind, okay, where you're still, you're not resisting anything, you just are. This is what will help you when dealing with women or with dealing with children, okay? They will constantly test you and press your buttons without even trying, just them existing. They will press your buttons, okay? And so this is all practice. So if you can master the self, you can master other people. Guiding them is no problem, because you can't ever be pushed off your square. right? But if you're easily pushed off your own square by yourself, how do you think you think you can handle a woman? You know what I'm saying? You can't even just like not get sad. Instead, you just spiral down into a pit of depression, right? Because of like this trigger or that trigger, or what have you. You know what I mean? So it really spend time to like cultivate the self first by observation, then through management. Last question here before I pull this to a close. What are your views on porn? Um, I don't know. It is what it is. Uh, anything is anything is bad when done in excess. Okay. Um, you can literally drink yourself to death with water. So, um, no, it's fine. Okay. The only thing that actually the problem that I have with porn is that it ruins your creativity. And for a guy to be a good lover, he cannot act like he's in porn. Like I've heard guys say, like, "Oh, I learned so much. So, I learned some things, to learn some things from porn about how to do this, how to be at sex or whatever." And I don't know, maybe if you live under a rock and you don't realize that like a penis goes inside a vagina or an asshole or a mouth, like, you know, whatever. But there's not like truly creative things on porn. Okay. And it doesn't give you any insight into how women actually work. Right. Like, there's deep psychological things, right? That are created when there's like real influence. Okay. When there's real trust involved and an aspect of the woman comes out to where she becomes so open that like sex takes on a whole different form. Your presence takes on a whole different form. Your voice takes on a whole different form. Okay. Everything changes. Okay. And again, the sex becomes a power. It has nothing to do with what you see in porn. Porn is just a sliver of what sexuality can be. And it tells you nothing of women. It tells you absolutely nothing. Okay. And a lot of it is just terrible acting anyways. If I watch porn, I really like the non-professional stuff where I can see like actual people like enjoying themselves. Okay. There's this couple, and they've got a domestic discipline type relationship, um, you know, and he smacks the hell out of her, man. I mean, never like bloodies or anything like that, but whatever. Like her cheeks get like red, very red. And I'm surprised by what I see is that like she can't suck a dick at all. Like she's terrible, like very stiff, uncertain. You can tell there's like not much enjoyment with it. Like she does it because she enjoys more so the state that she's in rather than enjoying like the actual dick sucking, which is, I mean, that's what I get from it. But it's very strange. Because if your woman's not sucking your dick well, like it's your job to advocate for your own pleasure and that you should instruct her. Okay. And it can be a fun time. Okay. Like where you just weave it right into the thing as if that's part of the foreplay or that's part of the sex act, and it becomes interesting. You say, listen, baby, today, like while you're like messing around, like kissing her neck, playing with her pussy and something like that. Or you tell her to, open her legs and tell her to start playing with her pussy and just sit next to her, and start petting her hair, like kissing her neck, and you're not really doing anything erotic with her. And you say, listen, today we're going to have a slightly different session today. And you tell her, today is going to be a classroom. Today, I'm going to teach you how to properly suck my dick. And that, if that's the first time ever hearing that, it's going to like shock her. It's going to put her into like this. It's going to make her kind of like pull for breath, because there's going to be some embarrassment. There's going to be some exposure. There's going to be, it's like, Johnny on the spot. There's going to be a bit of pressure. You've changed the pressure differential, right? but she's playing with her pussy, right? And maybe you pay attention, you watch the subtleties, see if she stops, you know? And you're like, lean in, did I tell you to stop? I don't think I told you to stop. And like keep going. And then you can just go into like a little bit more detail of like what's gonna happen. You describe what's gonna happen. Okay. All right. I'm gonna get you a pillow. I'm gonna put it on the floor because you're gonna be down there for a while. And I said, you're gonna keep going, and I'm gonna keep testing you until you get it right. And if you do a good enough job and you really nail it, I'll come on your face. I'll let you have daddy's come, or however you want to phrase it to make it into the completion is the reward. Okay. That sort of thing. And then afterwards, you give her high praise. Maybe during, if she's into degradation or whatever, you can chastise her for how terrible she's doing. Right? What are you doing? You call that sucking dick? What are you doing? All right, stop. All right, go get yourself some water, regroup, start again. You know, like, the whole thing. You could change the pressure, right? The pressure dial any way you want. Okay, but yeah, you should be advocating for your own pleasure. You should be comfortable instructing the woman on what to do, on what you like. Okay. Because there's males who will be like, I'm going to just kind of hope and pray that she kind of picks up on my signal or whatever, or like it's weird. You know what I'm saying? Like it's, they're not vocal. They're not really vocal about like what it is that they really want. So, get used to advocating for yourself. Oh, this is good. Yeah. Cause this is like the other side of it. Right. So I was just talking about like cutting off the negative. Thank you, Guns, for including what I forgot to add, which is growing the positive. So you have to weed the garden, but you also have to plant what you want. Okay. So he says, I focus on doing positive things that will allow me to live all of my life on my terms, remove negative harming things, health, fitness, debt, environment, and keep getting coaching. Right. But like adding to these, right? So like, adding to things that to your garden of health, your garden of fitness, your garden of debt or no debt, your environment, right? Like even just like cleaning your home, take like one day a week and just fucking clean the fuck out of your home and make everything perfect. And this will automatically change your mood. I promise you. Like it always feels good. Always. Put on some good music and just turn off your phone, right? And just focus on cleaning and do that like every week and just like a full on clean, and it'll change your attitude. Well, I mean, not like long term, but it'll change your state, right? Okay. I'm wrapping this up. I've been yapping at you guys for too long. If you want to talk, you want to get into these things on a more personal level, please follow the link to the free consultation, right? Everything is kept private. There's absolutely no judgment whatsoever. I mean, just recently, I found out like a guy, a new client, he lied to me, made up all kinds of crazy shit about his life. All right. About the girl he was seeing, this, that, and the other. Okay. I was nonplussed. I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want to waste your time, you want to waste your money with me. That's fine. Like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to do anything but guide you. And I cannot guide what does not want to be led. And it's the same attitude towards women, same attitude towards girls. I will lead you. Right. And Kitten, if you're still watching, if you remember when we first started talking, I said something very much along those lines. And I said, I will take you only as far and as deep as you want to go. So it's like you put your hand in mine and we will walk for as long and as deep as you are comfortable doing. And it's the same thing with coaching. And it comes down to will, comes down to willingness. So we can go as far as you are willing to go. And the thing is that the internal world, like, what's inside you, there's really no limit to it. There's no end. When you say, okay, like the job's done. Okay, it's never done. But it doesn't start. You don't go anywhere until you actually have true willingness. And it's so clear to see. Once you see it in someone, you can't unsee it. You don't get fooled by this or that or whatever. So that's why I didn't get upset with him. Okay, I'm also just not that type, right? I'm not holding judgment, okay? But he knows. And if he wants to take my hand and walk the path, right? The path of man. He wants to step foot on the way, on the path of truth, then he needs to do it. And otherwise, he's just going to stay where he is. And that's with everyone. That's with me. That's with you. That's with everybody. You have to take the choice of willingness and saying, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay. Because tomorrow you could be dead. And that's the truth of the matter. I mean, we convince ourselves that it's okay, that, oh, tomorrow's going to come. And yes, we're probably going to be alive tomorrow. So that reduces our sense of importance. We can say, tomorrow. Tomorrow. And that's the problem. It's the great thing of humanity, but also one of our greatest poisons, is that we have this incredible ability to adapt. And we have to turn away from that our ability to adapt, and say, tomorrow, I'll deal with it tomorrow. When it comes to yourself, don't accept that. Don't accept tomorrow. All right. Well, thank you for joining me on this talk. And thank you to those of you who are going to be catching this on the replay. We'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.